Now on BBC Two, nice work if you can get it.
Hello, this week Top Gear comes to you from the sunny island of Ibiza.
Tell them why we're in Ibiza, Catherine.
Because of the gorgeous, sexy Seat Ibiza, of course.
That's right, some intellectual colossus in the BBC thought it would be screamingly funny if we tested the Ibiza on the island of Ibiza.
And the problem is?
Well, where's it all going to end? We'll be testing the BMW M5 on the M5 motorway and getting Sharon Stone to test drive the Volkswagen Touran.
In your dreams?
We could do the Golf at Carnoustie and the Focus at an optician.
Look, you're just being obtuse now.
I know, an AC Cobra in a small Hessian bag.
I'm just going to ignore you. You're just
the
too
diminutive
boring.
Boy band
Shut
911
up.
test
Quiet.
the portion.
Also on Top Gear tonight, we find out what the clubbers of Ibiza think of the Ibiza.
Tiff gets to drive the new Maserati.
And Quentin gets driven up the wall by traffic planners. So, the Ibiza.
Here, in Ibiza.
Oh, now stop. Come on, this poor little car is about to head straight for a big bad bear pit.
Well, that's because Seat are getting cocky. They fancy a slice of the hot hatch market, and it's not easy.
No, but they're not sweating about it, because apparently they think they found a niche, which is the sports-minded car, whatever that means.
Well, that means that they don't think of themselves as a volume car manufacturer like, say, Rover or Ford or Peugeot. They think they're a specialist car manufacturer, so they want to chase the tail feathers of Alfa Romeo.
That's a little ambitious, isn't it? Have you seen the latest Alfa?
I know exactly what you mean.
Alfa's turned its cars into things of beauty. Just look at the wondrous 156 or the incomparable GTV. Now take a look at the new Seat Ibiza. Seat reckon they've spent £150 million on this car, and it's got 6,000 new parts.
And when a car maker finds that the best thing they can say about their new product is how many parts they've changed, it means, generally, that it looks just like the old one.
Which it does, apart from a new corporate nose, of course.
It's neat, but it ain't an Alfa Romeo.
But it has some nice touches, like the Seat symbol that doubles as a boot opener.
I suppose it's a lot like the clubs in Ibiza. They don't look much from the outside, but when you start to look inside, things really do start to happen. In fact, you can see the influence of Volkswagen as soon as you stick your head in the window.
Everything is stitched, screwed and fitted perfectly.
Seat have really thought about the interior this time, right down to a cute little TV screen on the centre console, giving temperature and hi-fi info.
And Seat reckon they've screwed the underpinnings down firmer this time, giving, according to them, an even better ride than Big Brother Golf.
So what do you think?
Well, it is surprisingly sporty. It doesn't look it, but it's got a bit of poke, hasn't it?
It's got some wallop, and that's because it's a 1.8 20-valve turbo, straight out the Golf and the Audi A3. 0 to 60, 7.5 seconds, 137 miles an hour, 157 brake. It is the hottest Seat yet. So if you want something that has some scorch and some beams, but doesn't look $1 million, then this is the car. And here's the best bit. It costs just under 14,000 quid. The equivalent Golf and 306 GTI cost over 18 grand.
So the Seat Ibiza 20 VT is a big bargain and a little belter to boot.
All these little switches and things means that it feels so good. I mean, the old one used to feel like it was made out of balsa wood and rice paper, but this is really, really sturdy. I always say that if you just move these switches like this and if there's no lateral movement, I mean, that's straight out of the Volkswagen Passat. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Top build quality, this,
Top
Catherine.
build quality. And I tell you where else there's no lateral movement. In my bum. Because these seats are fantastic, aren't they? They sort of you're hugged by them. Gripped in the thighs, I'd say. Very exciting.
Supported. It may look a lot like the old Ibiza from the outside, but under the skin, it could hardly be more different. This is a fine little car, fun to be in and fun to drive.
And, you know, given a backdrop of Balearic sun, sand and neon, it's not too hard on the eye at all, is it?
Not in the least. It's actually very pretty.
We love it, don't we?
Top noter.
Back in the 1950s, Maserati was a proud name, and this 3000 GT battled for honours with Jaguar and Ferrari on the racetracks of Europe. But by the 90s, the racing glories were confined to the record books, and the road cars had become eccentric uncles. Now, Maserati is back on the attack, and it's got its sights set on Jaguar. This is the new 3200 GT, front-engined, rear-wheel drive, and at £60,000, priced to go head-to-head with the supercharged XKR. Under the bonnet is a tweaked version of the existing 3.2-litre twin-turbo V8, producing 370 horsepower, 7 more than the Jag, and enough to provide acceleration figures that can match a Ferrari 456 GT. Which is ironic, as since 1997, Maserati have been controlled by Ferrari. When Ferrari moved into Maserati's Modena factory, they slaved hard to make this new coupe more dynamic and more desirable. Ferrari president Luca de Montezemolo says that modern Maseratis will offer daily drivability to complement the extreme sportiness of Ferraris. But that doesn't mean blunting the once proud trident on the badge. And the 3200 needs to be sharp to beat its rivals, Jaguar's Supreme XKR and the Porsche 911, lithe and dynamic. So how does the Maserati measure up? Let's start on the inside. The interior has a plush quality feel with nicely shaped twin-tone leather trim and a rather mixed yet still stylish range of instruments, with these classical chrome dials contrasting with the matte silver finish of these heater controls that have very tactile rubber switches. It's just a bit of a shame that the Maserati clock came from a Christmas cracker. And the view from the outside provides similarly mixed emotions. Whilst Ferraris are designed by the delicate pen of Pininfarina, this Maserati is the work of Giorgetto Giugiaro, a man best known for sports car classics like the Fiat Punto. So, while the front is attractively aggressive with that trident badge proudly displayed on the grille, it all gets a bit heavy-handed here at the back. Indeed, viewed from behind, the 3200 GT reminds me of a Honda Prelude springs to mind. And if you think that means there's plenty of space for all your luggage and your golf clubs, you'd be wrong, because most of the room is taken up by a 20-gallon fuel tank. Good enough for about 340 miles. And you can rack up that kind of distance very quickly. The sprint to 60 takes just 5.1 seconds. Top speed is 174 miles an hour. As the figures suggest, this is a very fast car, and the turbocharged engine is smooth and virtually lag-free, but the handling lacks finesse. The steering is rather too heavily weighted to hold the straight-ahead position and lacks feel. Push the car into a corner and the front tends to run a bit wide and the chassis will wallow in any nasty undulations. And another thing that's a bit disconcerting is that the brakes aren't exactly the sharpest in the business. I guess as long as you remember that this is a grand touring car, the Maserati 3200 is fine. Despite its flaws, I like this GT a lot. It's a vast improvement over recent Maseratis, and it's a car with a great deal of character. There is still a magic attached to that badge. But for the same sort of money, you could have a lot more space and a better ride with Jaguar's Supreme XKR. Or you could have far better handling and a lot more fun with Porsche's 911. So, while this Maserati may be good, it's still not quite good enough.
Still to come on Top Gear, we find out what the clubbers of Ibiza think of the Ibiza, and what Quentin thinks of car-sharing lanes.
Round here, that counts for a traffic jam. If only Britain's roads were like this. But they're not, and they never will be. And if John Prescott and his henchmen have their way, they're going to get even worse. Undeterred from the recent M4 bus lane fiasco, they've come up with another half-formed thought. You see, the government wants to inflict yet another one of their bad ideas on the motorist, car-sharing lanes. They've earmarked 10 stretches of roads, like here.
I think it's a terrible idea.
Here.
It's just going to make the traffic fall backwards.
Here.
I don't really agree with it at all.
Here.
We've got to be mad to do it.
And here.
If the roads are narrow enough now, we don't want them any more narrower.
The car share lane can only be used by buses and cars with more than 2 people travelling in them. The theory is that suburban commuters will cheerfully share their cars and traffic congestion will be reduced at a stroke. It's something the Americans have already spent millions of dollars on. They call them high-occupancy vehicle lanes. But at least over there, HOV lanes are a separate, dedicated carriageway, not an existing lane that's been converted.
Well, the Americans have got lots of space, fundamentally. They've got big, wide roads running over long distances, very few interchanges, very few corners. The Americans don't like going round corners. And you've got typically 8, 10 lanes. You've got plenty of space to introduce them. Indeed, they often operate the HOV lanes from origin to destination. That's a great benefit, a great bonus to the system.
Back on this side of the Atlantic, this is what Stanningley Bypass in Leeds looked like 2 years ago. And this is Stanningley today. There's no difference. In fact, the number of cars has gone up, not down. So Britain's first car share lane hasn't worked. £700,000 has been squandered on an experiment that's failed.
Fundamentally, we've got this difficulty of space. If you put an HOV lane in, or a special bus lane for that matter, you are inviting problems of reducing the road capacity. You've got to look very carefully at trips that people undertake to get to work, the length of journey, and so on. And then you're in a position to take something on and do something about the congestion problem.
Researchers at Edinburgh University reckon that one of the problems is the not in my front seat factor. All their data suggests that getting commuters to willingly give up their passenger seat is an act of the purest optimism. And drivers like Linda Hayward agree.
I like to have all my personal things to hand on the passenger seat. I certainly won't want to have anybody in the car on a permanent basis. Because it's my responsibility to get them there and back from work. If I had to give, like, men a lift, they're quite fond of giving you useful bits of information, helpful hints, which you don't need because you're quite capable of thinking of it yourself. Although they don't always think so.
But the bureaucrats are worried. The Blackwall Tunnel in South London was going to have an experimental car-sharing lane too. But the public response has been so hostile that the Highways Agency has put it on hold. And when we asked them for a statement, they said they'd rather not talk about it publicly. Perhaps someone in Westminster is having second thoughts. Let's hope so.
So we like the Seat Ibiza because it's fun and feisty and several